Ladies and gentlemen, us humans have asked some pretty important questions over the span of our existence. Who are we? Why are we here? I don't know. What do you want? Would you like fries with that? Do it squirt! But today we are going to ask what just might be the most important question of all existence. And that question is, what is better? The $100 TheOne CHAB Clone or the $500 BRS Latch-less Kukri CHAB? And the answer should be obvious, or at least you would think it would be, because it is. But it isn't. What is up, guys? My name is DenDenBMX, and today we're going to be comparing these two Balisongs. We're going to put them nuts to butts, we're going to make them rub fronts, get real up close and stinky, and we're going to see which one comes out on top. So the way this is going to go down is we're going to flip these things side by side, do the same tricks on both, see which ones feel better, which ones feel worse, or if it's any easier or harder to do them on either of these Balisongs. And then we're going to take an up close look, really compare these two, look at the differences, and then I guess from there we'll get our final concluding thoughts. If you guys go on to enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you let me know and help support the engagement on this video by leaving a like, leave a comment, give me your thoughts and opinions, maybe share the video around. And if you haven't already and you enjoy the content that I put out on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So before we start the side-by-side comparison, I just kind of want to flip each one of them for a minute and get kind of like a general consensus of how both of them flip. And we'll start with the CHAB Clone. And I gotta say, I'm pretty comfortable with this Balisong. I've had it for a couple of years now, and I've always really liked the way it flips, especially for the price. Like, I really agree with people when they say it's the best Balisong clone that you could buy. I know that there's a few that have come out recently that are kind of competing for that title, but this one has always been a damn good flipper. Like, it's balanced very well, and most tricks are pretty effortless on it. Like, fans of all kinds feel really good on this Balisong. Aerials are super easy to time with this thing, and I'm not really scared to do them at all on this Balisong because I'm pretty confident that I'm always going to know where it's going to go. Scissors are also pretty easy on this thing. It's not like any one trick is kind of wonky on it like how some Balisongs are. It's like a really good workhorse beater Balisong. Like, you might want to replace the stock hardware on this thing, but once you do, this thing's pretty tank-like, but it's not that heavy. So it's a really good beater, and it's balanced really well, so it's going to flip really good. So yeah, whoa, look at that. But yeah, I've always really liked how the CHAB Clone flips, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. So that's the CHAB Clone. Now to the big old chungus normal Kukri CHAB. This thing also flips really well. It's just the one thing about it is that it wants to take out my feet. It's noticeably louder, and it might also be noticeably slower because this thing's heavy. You see, my particular version of a channel Alpha Beast is probably the heaviest variation of a channel Alpha Beast because it's the latchless version of the handles, which do add a bit more weight. Also, the Kukri blade is a bit heavier than the regular Bowie or like the regular normal Alpha Beast blade. And that's kind of the discrepancy with this comparison, is the CHAB Clone is like a clone of a very standard channel Alpha Beast with the latch cutouts, but the version of channel Alpha Beast that I have is the Kukri blade that's latchless, and it is quite a bit heavier. I said it in my review of this Balisong, it flips really well, and it's actually balanced very good. Like, you can pretty much do anything you want on this Balisong, but it's just heavier and a little bit more sluggish and slow. But I mean, you can do pretty much anything you want on this Balisong. Like, aerials are still pretty easy to time on this thing. It's just a little bit scarier because there's a lot more momentum going around. Fans feel really good on this Balisong. Since it's a bit heavier, there's a bit more momentum. So I gotta say, when you do fans and that momentum gets going, it does feel pretty good. You just gotta be a little careful because that much more momentum and that much more weight is just gonna equal a deeper cut if you do get cut. So I'm always just a little bit more careful when I'm flipping this Balisong, just because I don't want to get stitches. Fans feel really good on this Balisong, both regular and choker. And then twirls feel good. Scissors feel pretty good on this thing. Chaplains are all right. Everything on it feels pretty good and is doable. It's just a little bit slower and a little bit more sluggish than I kind of prefer. I didn't mention it in my review, but this Balisong kind of does end up triggering my carpal tunnel a little bit. I actually haven't had too many problems with my carpal tunnel like this past year and a half or so. But with this Balisong, if I flip nonstop for a little too long, I do notice my hand starts cramping up and freezing up and getting a little sore. But that's kind of just to be expected. The balance isn't what hinders this Balisong, it's the weight. For me, it's kind of like a blast from the past because I used to flip brass Balisongs and like really heavy stainless steel. But with like modern day tricks, you do notice the weight a little bit more, and you do notice that it's a little more sluggish than a lot of other Balisongs. But when it just comes to like the balance and like the flippability and the trickability of this thing, it still can pretty much do everything you want. Just a little bit slower, I'd say. I mean, you can put a little bit extra oomph into your flipping and really use this momentum to your advantage to really flip this thing pretty quickly, but that's going to take a lot more effort, and it's going to be a lot more of a risk because, again, this thing's heavy, so if this blade comes in contact with your fingers, it's probably not going to be a very forgiving cut. So that's kind of why I don't really go out of my way to try and flip this thing a little bit faster than it wants to. So yeah, that's the BRS Latch-less Kukri CHAB. Now let's do some tricks back to back, see how they feel. Already right now I can tell probably the biggest thing that sticks out to me is the texture of these two Balisongs and the weight. The CHAB Clone is lighter, and I prefer that, I'm not going to lie. But again, if I had a normal, regular bladed Channel Alpha Beast with the latch cutouts, I'm sure this weight difference wouldn't be as drastic. So that's just one thing you got to kind of keep in mind when comparing my two particular Alpha Beasts. And when it comes to the texture, it is a bit smoother, and that kind of results in being just a little bit slipperier too. It's not like, this isn't like an aluminum Balisong where it's going to fling out of your hands, but I do notice that it is a little bit more slick than the regular Alpha Beast. Yeah, the BRS Alpha Beast is a lot more grippy. The texture that they use on the handles is a lot more grippy, but it's also a lot more rough. When I first started flipping this thing, it kind of tore up my hands a little bit just because of how rough it was. And so that's kind of like a personal preference thing. Like, do you want the surface of your Balisong to be a little bit nicer and a little smoother at the risk of losing some grip? Or do you want a really grippy Balisong that may tear up your hands? I mean, I do like the grip of the BRS Alpha Beast a little bit more, but I like the way the CHAB Clone feels in my hand a little bit more. It's kind of hard to explain. Now for some side-by-side tricks, we'll start by doing just some twirls and some behind the 8 balls and some helixes, that kind of beat. And on the CHAB Clone, they all feel really good. I get to sit here and do twirls on this thing all day. And then for the BRS Alpha Beast, they still feel really good on this thing. It's a little bit slower again. I'm probably going to say that for every single trick. The BRS CHAB is going to be a little bit slower than the CHAB Clone, but it still feels good. And then fans feel really good on both of these Balisongs. The regular BRS CHAB, I'd say, carries momentum a little bit better. It makes it feel pretty effortless once it gets going. You still got to put a little bit more oomph into it because it's a bit heavier, but they both feel really good. It just kind of feels like a different choker fan. And then aerials are effortless to time on the CHAB Clone just because it's so much lighter and I'm not as apprehensive yeeting it up into the air. However, with the Kukri CHAB, it is a little bit more scary because this thing's so much heavier. I am a little bit more apprehensive when throwing this thing up into the air. That being said, it still is pretty easy to time, but other than that, aerials still feel really good on this Balisong, and it is pretty satisfying to catch them. I noticed that the BRS Kukri CHAB kind of sometimes wants to get a little wonky during parabolic aerials. I think in the review there was a couple that got a little squirrely, but yeah, when I'm flipping and just kind of like that, it's a little bit more unpredictable in the air, and I think that may have something to do with just the Kukri blade. But I mean, I don't know, sometimes it just wants to do something weird, but then other times it does them just fine. So I don't know, parabolics are a little bit weird on the Kukri CHAB, especially compared to the CHAB Clone, where it's essentially the same thing every single time, and it's very predictable. Yeah, I'd say the parabolics on the CHAB Clone is a lot more predictable than it is on the regular Kukri CHAB. And again, I think that has something to do with the blade shape, because the blade shape on the CHAB Clone is pretty straight, but my BRS CHAB is the Kukri blade, so that can, I think that, so that does kind of mess with how it acts in the air a little bit, especially when it comes to stuff like parabolics. I mean, it's still decently consistent. You just kind of got to keep an eye on it. I wouldn't like mindlessly throw a parabolic with the BRS CHAB as I would with the CHAB Clone. Let's look at something like ladders. Ladders just kind of feel really good on both of these Balisongs. I think I would, I don't know. I'm not really noticing it being a little more slippery. Let's look at the regular CHAB. Yeah, I think I like ladders on the BRS CHAB more than I like them on the CHAB Clone, just because this texture has a little bit more grip, and also the extra weight of this Balisong really helps the momentum of the ladder come around a lot more effortlessly. Like with the CHAB Clone, since it is a little lighter, you do have to put a little bit more effort into making sure the ladder comes all the way around. But with the regular CHAB, the momentum of these handles kind of just does it for you. It's pretty cool. However, it is a little bit slower and a little bit heavier, and it does make my hand more sore. So again, it's kind of like a give and take thing. And we already talked about choker fans and twirls. Actually, I think these are twirls, and we were talking about rollovers. they both feel pretty good. Chaplains feel pretty good on the BRS Kukri CHAB. I don't really notice it wanting to fly off my finger that much. And then with the CHAB Clone, again, it's kind of the same story. Twirls feel pretty good, feel pretty effortless. And then chaplains are kind of like the same story. This one's pretty neutral, but the weight that it does have is at the ends of the handles and at the end of the blade. So it's not really trying to fly off my finger that much at all. So yeah, overall, both these things flip pretty damn good. I'd say the biggest difference is just the weight of these Balisongs. They're both balanced very good, but the CHAB Clone is lighter than the particular version of the BRS CHAB that I have. Not to say that the BRS CHAB is a bad flipper, it is not. It's just this particular one that I have is a little too heavy for my liking. Like, I still like the way it flips, but I just wish, if I was to put it away, I'd say I wish it was the same Balisong, just lighter. Like, I wish they'd maybe just hollowed out the inside a little bit more. Maybe have it to where they come looking like that hammer CHAB. It's just, the weight on the BRS CHAB is just a little too much for this big fellow you watch on YouTube. Again, not to say that it's a bad thing, it's just that's the one gripe that I personally have with my particular version. That's why I think I prefer the CHAB Clone, just because it's faster, like just naturally. I don't have to put as much effort into making this thing flip fast as I would with the regular BRS CHAB. So, yeah, I think for this particular instance with the BRS CHAB that I happen to have, I prefer the flippability of the CHAB Clone just because of how much lighter it is. I just feel like I can flip a lot more comfortably at the speed that I want on the CHAB Clone than I can with the regular CHAB. And that is the moment that a bunch of 40-year-old men are going to dislike this video because I dared to say something good about a clone, and now for the next week and a half everyone's going to be crying about me on the Discord server, apparently. I don't know, I'm not on it, but people say they talk shit about me on there. I'm sorry I don't pander to the anti-clone stupidity that isn't based in fact. And if that's the reason why you don't like me, then I guess that's a you problem, bro. Your boos mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer. Yeah, I've tried my best to not mention the anti-clone weirdos so far in this video, but they were going to come up eventually. And honestly, I don't really want to give them that much attention because I've already explained in like 7 videos why their mindset and their ideology is pretty dumb and silly and not based in anything real. If they're going to ignore the fact that clones don't harm the sales of the original manufacturer in any way, shape, or form, and also ignore the fact that these aren't counterfeits, and according to copyright law, they're perfectly legal. And if they're going to use the it's a morality issue scapegoat while simultaneously going and bullying and shaming people for having clones without taking a second to contemplate or think about or care about why most people actually buy clones, if you're not going to take the time to critically think about that stuff and be like, meh, I don't like clones. Yeah. If you aren't willing to do that, then I'm not willing to explain to you, like why should I try and explain it the 5th time when you didn't listen the first 4 times? You know what one of my favorite lyrics ever is? It's from a band called Bad Omens. The song's called Mercy. They say, you can give sight to the blind, but you can't force them to see. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it not be a dipshit. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it not... Fuck. So I think that's going to wrap up the flipping demo. Wow, wasn't that flipping comparison very intense and borderline sexual? Let's get even more steamy and take a nice up-close look and compare these 2 Balisongs visually and see what minute and not so minute details they have betwixt them. But before we do that, I just got to be a little bit more of a tool and let you guys know about the channel membership here over at DenDenBMX, where tiers start as low as $3 and you get access to exclusive members-only videos on top of some other perks that you could get depending on the tier you choose, like the shoutouts that Demano21, Modern Balisong, Cosmic Steez, and Vanilla Gorilla Envy are getting. If these guys were parking tickets, then they've got fine written all over them. So if you want to join them in getting a shoutout and getting access to exclusive members-only videos, you can go ahead and join the channel membership. But if that's too much of a commitment, but you still want to contribute to the channel, you can always hit that brand new super thanks button down there. I am done being a tool. Let's get real up close and personal with these 2 Balisongs and then end this video. So there you have the CHAB and the clone sitting pretty in the cute little BRS mini purse that comes with the order of every BRS CHAB. Now I want to ask you guys a question. Which one is the real BRS CHAB and which one is the CHAB clone? Now I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to tell the difference instantly. And if you are, congratulations, you've effectively proven why the CHAB clone is not a counterfeit and is perfectly legal within copyright law, because there are very obvious differences between the two. The most glaring one is going to be that the CHAB clone, which is this one in my right hand, has Zen pins as compared to the real BRS CHAB that has Tang pins. That is a very big visual and build difference between these two Balisongs. Another difference is that the real BRS CHAB has the BRS logo and the S35VN stamp right there. The TheOne CHAB Clone has no logos whatsoever. So this literally cannot be a counterfeit because there's no BRS logo claiming that it's a BRS knife. Now I also want to point out that this CHAB clone is a clone of a standard BRS CHAB with the standard Alpha Beast blade and with the latched cutouts. However, the channel Alpha Beast that I have has the Kukri blade and the latchless cutouts. So these are going to be different anyway, but a standard BRS Alpha Beast is still going to have Tang pins and is still going to have the BRS logos right there in that area. Now the handles on these Balisongs are both solid titanium channel handles, and the difference between them is the quality of titanium. The CHAB clone probably has like grade 2 or 3 titanium. However, the real BRS CHAB has grade 5 or 6 titanium. I don't know which specifically, but I know it contains a much higher grade of titanium, which does contribute to the higher price tag this thing has. Same thing with the steel that the blades are made out of. I believe the clone is made out of D2 steel, and then the BRS Kukri CHAB blade is made out of S35VN, which is quite a high quality grade of blade steel, which also contributes to the high price tag this thing has. Like I mentioned a second ago, the CHAB clone has a Zen pin system and the BRS CHAB has a Tang pin system. Both of these Balisongs have bronze phosphorus washers that are guiding the bushing pivot system that comes on both of these Balisongs. Now the thing with clones is that more often than not, they are not going to come with the best tolerances. Sometimes you'll luck out and they will have 0 play and 0 tap, but like mine, it does have just a smidge of play, and then since there's that much play, there of course is going to be tap. And then on the real BRS CHAB, it is tuned pretty damn well, so there is no play and there is hardly any tap. There's like a little wiggle. That's about it. Now, a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, well, of course, the BRS CHAB is $500. This is $100. And while that's how it should be, you'd actually be surprised. BRS kind of has a reputation for actually not coming with the best tolerances. So I was pretty surprised when my BRS CHAB came with 0 play and 0 tap, because I know that it's more common for them to come with play and tap than for them to not. So it was a pleasant surprise. I really think for $500, it shouldn't have any play or any tap. But I know that there's tons of people with Alpha Beasts and channel Alpha Beasts that have play and tap, and then I am also the owner of a BRS replicant that has had play and tap since I got it. So do with that information what you will. I just want you to know that for $100 you can pretty much always expect to have some sort of play and tap. But the good news is, since this does have a bushing system, if it has play and tap, it's probably because the bushings are oversized, so you should be able to tune this down to 0 play and 0 tap. I personally haven't done it on my CHAB clone because, well, I don't really care to. I am not that big of a stickler for 0 play and 0 tap, but I know some people are, which is why I pointed it out. Now, comparing the size of these two Balisongs, if we look at the thickness of the handles, you can see that the BRS CHAB is just a little bit thicker, but it's just enough to where you can kind of see that it is a little bit thicker, and then it's much easier to see. From this angle, you can tell that the CHAB clone handles are a little bit skinnier, a little more rectangular, and then the BRS CHAB is a little bit more squared off and a little bit thicker, which also probably contributes to the weight difference between these two Balisongs. And then let me open them up so you can get a nice look at the differences between the standard Alpha Beast blade and the Kukri version of the blade. Another difference is going to be the quality of the hardware. An American-made BRS Alpha Beast is going to have much better quality than a Chinese-made clone. That's just kind of how it is. But also, everyone knows what kind and where to get the American-made replacement screws for the CHAB clone, so that really doesn't end up being much of a difference. So if you don't like the Chinese hardware, the American-made replacement screws and the specs of them are pretty readily available information within the community. And as you can see, the BRS CHAB ends up being just a little bit taller. And then if we look at the milling on these two Balisongs, both are pretty good. I'd say the milling on the BRS CHAB is a little bit better, or at least I'd expect it to be. And then as you can see, the milling for the channel on the CHAB clone up here is just a big standard cutout. However, on the BRS CHAB, it is still a pretty standard cutout, but here at the end, they do this nice swoop up that leads up to the big block of titanium back here, which is a pretty nice little touch. And then here's the milling on the other side as well. Both are pretty clean, but I think the BRS CHAB is just a little bit more clean and has a little bit more pizzazz with the nice little swoop up, kicker-esque little ramp. It looks like it'd be pretty fun to ride on my BMX bike, not gonna lie. So I think we have compared both of these Balisongs visually about as much as we can. Let's move on to the sound test for these two Balisongs. And for this sound test, we are going to get some help from Carbon Honey. This is not a sponsored video. I recently bought a bottle of Carbon Honey because the owners of this brand recently came upon hard times and they ended up selling a bunch, and I figured this was the perfect time to get some. So I will be using some thick Carbon Honey for the sound test. Once again, a huge shout out to Carbon Honey. This is not a sponsored video, but if they ever want one to be, hit me up, Carbon Honey. But I will be using this Balisong oil for the sound test for these two Balisongs, and then after that, we will get our final concluding thoughts for this video. Here's the sound test for the CHAB Clone with some thick Carbon Honey in there. There's the CHAB Clone. Now here's the sound test for the BRS Kukri CHAB with Carbon Honey in it. And there's the sound test. So which Balisong is better, you say, asking me a question, words. Let me answer your question with a question. In which way are you pertaining to? If we're talking about just basic specs and build quality, then like no shit, the BRS CHAB is better. Like a lot better. The build of materials that they use for the BRS CHAB are just blatantly superior. But that's also reflected in the price. The BRS CHAB is 5 times more expensive than the CHAB Clone. Now does the BRS CHAB flip time 5s better? Fuck. Now does the BRS CHAB flip 5 times better than the CHAB Clone? Me personally, I don't really think so. Especially not this specific model of BRS CHAB that I got. It still flips very good, don't get me wrong. But when it comes down to these two specific Balisongs, I like the way the CHAB Clone flips more. If this was a more standard Alpha Beast with a normal Alpha Beast blade and with latch cutouts, I'm sure my preference would end up being a lot closer, and I might even prefer the regular Alpha Beast. Who knows? But I'm saying for the two CHABs that I have in my hand, I prefer the way this CHAB Clone flips. When it comes down to tolerances, the BRS CHAB is superior. Now when it comes to Tang pins versus Zen pins, I much prefer Zen pins for durability. However, the sound of the Tang pins on the BRS CHAB is bananas. That being said, I have seen many a Tang pin on an Alpha Beast smush in to where an Alpha Beast ends up having handle slap. And I'm kind of concerned that it may end up happening over time with this Balisong, because these are the heaviest version of Alpha Beast handles, and these Tang pins aren't very big, like at all. They're not very long, and they're just a hair offset on my specific Alpha Beast, so I don't know, I'm a little concerned that over time, these Tang pins aren't going to hold up very well. And overall, I think Zen pins end up being a little more durable than Tang pins. So when it comes to the Zen pin versus Tang pin category, I'm going to have to give it to the CHAB Clone because it's the one that has Zen pins. I would really love to see a BRS version of an Alpha Beast with Zen pins, personally. And then for sound, the winner has to be the BRS CHAB because this thing is one of the nuttiest things I've ever heard. Don't get me wrong, I love the sound of the CHAB Clone too, but the sound of the BRS CHAB, it's something else. It's loud as hell too. And when we break it off into bullet points like that, I think that's 2 victories for the CHAB Clone and 3 for the BRS CHAB. So I guess if you want, you could consider that the BRS CHAB is superior, even though you should already consider that because again, this is a $500 Balisong and this is a $100 Balisong. If the CHAB Clone was up to par in flippability, build quality, all these other things, then BRS would just be ripping people off. But that's not the case. Now when you ask that question in a different way, like, is the CHAB Clone a good flipper for $100? Then hell yes, it's a fantastic flipper. It's one of the best Balisong flippers I have, and it's only $100. Now when you ask that same question to the regular CHAB, is this a good flipper for $500? I think that answer could still be yes, depending on the person you are. Me personally, I think it's going to be a no, just because this specific Alpha Beast is really heavy, and I don't necessarily prefer that because it ends up flipping slower. But I'm sure that there are people that love the speed of this Balisong, and there are other variations of the BRS CHAB that could be latchless or have a lighter blade that would end up flipping faster. So while these answers may seem obvious, you kind of have to ask more questions in order to get like the true answer, because it's not like flat out which one is better, because that just doesn't work with these two Balisongs. Balisongs. Yeah, they look similar, but there's a lot of differences between the two that are pretty important differences that people regularly ignore, which I don't understand. It's stupid. You can't compare these without mentioning the price, because the price is one of the most important factors of these. And that goes for people on both sides of the aisle. A lot of these anti-clone people will be like, don't get a CHAB clone. It's built like a piece of shit compared to a real BRS CHAB. And it's like, yeah, no shit. This is $100 and this is $500. Of course the build quality is going to be better. If it's not, I'd be appalled. And then there's other people that would be like, I just get a CHAB clone because it flips way better than a BRS CHAB. And if we're being real, when it comes to some combinations or setups for CHABs, I could see that. But you also got to remember that when it comes to build quality, it's just not as good as a BRS CHAB. Yes, it's titanium, but it's not as good titanium. Yes, it has bushings and good hardware, but not as good hardware as a BRS CHAB. That's not me knocking the clone, it's just me being blatantly honest, because again, they're different priced objects. Flippability is subjective. Build quality is pretty objective. Does that mean that the CHAB clone is a piece of shit? Hell no. For $100, it's fantastic. But when you're comparing it to a Balisong that is 5 times the price of it, the more expensive Balisong at least should be made of higher quality materials and just be constructed overall in a better way, which this is. The quality of the materials used and the build quality is just going to be better. That should at least be how it is, and that should be what you expect, and in this case, that does happen to be what it is. And that's not knocking the CHAB clone. For $100, this thing is an amazing flipper, and is one of the best Balisongs that you can get for $100. And now when it comes to flippability, that's all subjective. Me personally, I prefer the way my CHAB clone flips to my Kukri CHAB, but that's also just because of some discrepancies. So is there a winner? I guess when you look at the bullet points, I would say the BRS CHAB is the winner, but for me, I think flipping is the most important thing, and I gotta tell you, I prefer the flippability of the CHAB clone than of the Latch-less Kukri CHAB that I chose to buy. Now, if I chose to get a standard CHAB with latch cutouts and with a standard Alpha Beast blade, who knows, that could be a different story. Again, it's like I said, the answer at face value should be pretty obvious, but you really have to like dig deeper and ask more questions within those questions to get a more solid answer that I think people are going to enjoy. Really, I don't think either of them are the loser here in this competition, because what we're comparing is so different even though they look so similar. I think build quality wise, this is far superior, but when it comes to flippability, I personally prefer the configuration and setup of my CHAB clone than I do of my Latch-less Kukri CHAB. So I think that is going to wrap up today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching if you made it this far. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you let me know once again by leaving a like on this video. Help me please my dominatrix known as the YouTube algorithm. Leave a comment on this video giving me your thoughts and opinions. Have you flipped both a CHAB clone and a BRS CHAB? Let me know in the comments which one you like more. Share this video around, help spread the knowledge. And last but not least, if you enjoy the content that I put out on this channel and you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so you can be notified the next time I upload a video. And last but not least, in this big old tool speech, make sure you follow me on Instagram at DenDenBMX. Thank you guys once again so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.